Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as a return guest to the Teaching Journeys podcast, Janelle Miller Moravek. Janelle is a nonprofit leader and mental health advocate. She has led youth and family counseling as executive director since 2009, driving its growth and impact across Lake County, Illinois. With a deep commitment to increasing access to mental health services, she oversees strategy, programming, and operations while fostering strong partnerships throughout the community. Janelle plays a key leadership role in the region, serving on the board of the Lake County Alliance for Human Services and co-chairing the Lake County Behavioral Health Action Team. Her prior experience includes development roles at Carmel Catholic High School and Barat College. She holds a BA in French Studies from Wesleyan University and lives in Libertyville with her husband and 3 children. Janelle, welcome back to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been looking forward to our return conversation for quite a while now.
Me too. I'm thrilled to be back and continue this awesome dialogue we've got going.
I was introduced to you through Anastasia Lipsky, who is a wonderful podcast agent, very diligent about vetting her clients and making sure that they're connected with the podcast host that's going to accurately and genuinely reflect their message. We had a great first episode. In fact, it was episode 239 back in March of this year. We talked basically about the mission of YFC, how you got into the mental health field, what clinicians needed to know about emerging young adults in the mental health system, how to upskill individuals who are working with mental health challenges. If for somebody who's struggling, what's the best way for them to access support? So we covered a lot of different ground in general about just mental health, about the mission of your agency and where the mission of your agency falls into that whole spectrum of the provision of mental health services. But today we're going to get a little more specific. And we're going to talk about why it is important for parents to consistently be involved in their child's therapy, and also to talk a little bit about the increase in requests for services your agency has had for children from 6 to 11, which to me is a telling statistic and a telling age category. So first of all, why is it important for parents to consistently be involved in therapy with their children, and what does that involvement look like?
Parents control the home environment. And when we work with kids here at YFC, we have them for 45 minutes, maybe 53, right? That's it. But then they go home. And if they don't have a parent there who is reinforcing what happened in therapy, who's changing that system, our impact is going to be really minimal on the client and the clinical outcomes. So I think it's 2 things, right? It's the parent needs to understand what's being worked on and how we're addressing the problem they came in for, so that they can help support it at home. I kind of feel like it's like piano lessons. My kids all took piano lessons, and I really, in some ways, it's a lot like signing your kid up for a lesson. As a parent, we set the tone in our households. And if we want to expect change to happen, we have to be part of that. Like, we have to own that. And so parents are so important when we're dealing with children and adolescents.
I tell my students at Utica University, because I teach an impact of addiction on children and families course, I tell them, I said, if you're dealing with the minor child, you can't deal with the child exclusively and exclude the rest of the family. The rest of the family has to be involved. The parents, legal guardians, extended family, if they happen to be part of the same household, they are influencing that child every day with their behavior, with their thoughts, with their beliefs. We need to make them a part of the process, because if that child is having issues, we need to see what the parents are maybe doing unintentionally, for example, that are
Mm-hmm.
contributing to those issues. And we have to be able to effectively do interventions involving the entire family.
Yeah.
Even if you segment the family, and there's segmentation in family therapy where you can work with certain aspects of the system, as long as the family's okay with that. But they still, parents and legal guardians, anybody that's in that household has to be involved. And the other thing, if you're doing an intervention with the child, the parent isn't there, that you can't expect a child that's 6 or 7 years old is going to be able to accurately reflect to the parents what they did in therapy.
Correct. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
100%.
when I was 6 or 7 years old, I can't remember, I mean, that's been a long time ago, but I don't remember having to tell my mom about an intervention that I did with a therapist back then.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And there's therapy can look different, right, for different people, because everyone has a different reason for coming in, and everyone has a
mhm,
different system and supports and strengths. And but in general, I think about if you're 6 or 7, right, the parent needs a check-in every week, right? And it's how are things going? What's the feedback, right? We're coaching that parent. We're providing
mhm,
psychoeducation. The parent may or may not be in the room with us when we're doing the work the whole time, but there still has to be that connection.
yep,
Um, I've experienced and seen it done a bunch of different ways. And of course, you know, for example, when my son was struggling, we first got that ADHD diagnosis. Um, we'd gotten him tested, and one of the recommendations was get some CBT therapy.
mm,
So I knew exactly what I was looking for. And he was a boy. He was like, so he had wiggles. I ended up with a movement-based therapist. I thought, oh, this will be a great fit. Um, and she was great. Oh, she was very clear. You're going to be in the room with me the whole time. And she had me sit in a corner, a little couch, just sit there. And then she would explain, she'd model, she'd teach the intervention. And then she would turn to me and say, okay, now you do it. Right. And then, okay, let's talk about how you can use this at home. And then the next week when we came in, it was a check-in. So how'd it go? What went well? What didn't go well? And that for dealing with ADHD behaviors was great, right? It's not going to work for everybody. My daughter was in that tweeny period where it gets a little, you know,
mhm.
dicey. They don't want parents involved. Um, and so she did go in the room on her own, right? But we negotiated with the therapist
Yeah.
how much I would know, right? So I was involved without being involved.
And, I think as long as that's part of the informed consent part of therapy, where you're told that if, let's say you have a 12 or 13-year-old, they're like in between that, the tweens.
Right.
I might sit down and tell you, Janelle, there's going to be certain times where I'm going to want to talk to your daughter alone.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that as long as she's a minor child, you're legally responsible for her treatment, and you have a right to know generally what those interventions are.
Yeah.
And particularly if she's doing anything that's a danger to herself and others, we're obligated by law to make sure that we tell the parents.
Right.
It tends, I think, to get a little trickier with substance abuse. I think
Mm,
it tends to
yes.
get a little trickier with that, because I think a therapist might find themselves, well, how do I break this information to the parents without violating the trust of the child that I'm working with?
Yeah.
So maybe kind of like a supported, or you're a joining intervention where I sit down with, let's say, your daughter or anybody else who may be affected, and we rehearse this and say, you need to tell your parents what's going on. I am going to
Yes.
be here with you. I'm going to support you. And I'm not going to take your side, but I'm going to support you as you tell them this very difficult piece of information, but you have to let them know.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, right, there's this point where it's a great learning opportunity for the child and to make progress in their relationship with their parents to as long as we talk about it, hey, this is something I've got to like you said, it's something I'm going to have to share with your parents. Let's talk about what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
And right, empowering the client to to have some control and some say in what that looks like means it's going to go better, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So why don't parents accompany their children consistently for treatment, even though you've informed them that they need to be there? It's going to be important for the growth and the development of their child to be there. So why do they don't live up to their end of that bargain?
I don't think the fault is all on the parent. I think, listen, parents are busy,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think all parents have the understanding of what therapy is supposed to look like with children. And so, in some ways, they do treat it like an activity. They drop off, they pick up, right? And they want their child to acquire a skill, similar to I'm going to drop off my kid at soccer practice, right? But your kid's not going to be a good soccer player if you don't know how to practice and kick the ball in between, right? It's the same thing. So I think parents aren't aware. I think parents are pressed for time.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that clinicians are sometimes intimidated by parents. Well,
Okay.
right. If the clinician isn't a parent themselves, I mean, clinicians have their own stuff going on, right? And
Mhm.
they can, especially in community health organizations, they tend to be emerging professionals. So they might not be confident in that rapport with the parent and, you know, being in that teaching, coaching mode with someone who's a lot older than them.
Mhm.
Um, in my community, parents can be type A, big personalities. It
Mhm.
can be hard to manage that conflict of I need you here. You don't want to be here, but I need you here. And so we spend a lot of time training and supporting our clinicians in working with families because it's a skill like any other clinical skill.
Yeah, I mean, your best staff are the best trained staff.
Yeah.
And I can understand where it can be partly the parents because of their busy schedules and demands on their time and just feeling overwhelmed, particularly the current economic client, if they have to work 2 or 3 different jobs,
Yeah.
they probably don't have enough left in the tank to devote to another issue. So a lot of it's what's going on systemically,
Yeah.
with the economy and everything else that's impacting their ability to participate. But the other thing is you brought up a really great point is about clinician countertransference or imposter
Really.
syndrome, however you want to look at that.
Yeah.
It's like, what if that clinician had heard, from somebody older that, well, you don't really have anything to offer to me. And all of a sudden they've internalized that message. It's formed a neural pathway in their brain that constantly gets reinforced every time that situation comes up.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're responding to the parent, not as if they're the parent, but as if the older individual told them they had nothing left to offer, right? So then that's what it involves. And I mean, as part of their training, if you're feeling overwhelmed, ask for help from your supervisor.
Yep.
Go into a co-therapist situation and sit down with your supervisor and process the source of your countertransference.
Yes.
What was it about this interaction that was so stressful for you that charged you up emotionally? And
Yeah.
let's take a look and see if we can tap into characteristics that were reminiscent of characteristics that an individual had that was a source of unresolved conflict or just reminded them of that person in general. And then provide them the necessary support. Either we transfer them from the case, provide a co-therapy situation, and also offer EAP as an option or offer,
Yep.
them, I'll suggest that they take a look at therapy to resolve or manage what has now surfaced because of that client interaction. And here's the other thing that I think clinicians, like you said, have their own stuff. We are
Hmm.
humans.
Hmm.
We bring our personal histories into any interaction in the workplace.
Everybody
You know,
does.
and sometimes those histories take priority over the counseling relationship. We have to step back and say, okay, what's causing me to not look at this client objectively? What's going on within me? That's a sign of one, being self-aware, but it's also the sign of a pretty doggone good therapist. If they could
Yep.
sit down and say, something is off here. What do I need to do to address this?
Yep. Yes, 100%. And so teaching organizations like YFC, right? Like we provide when we get students, we're going to onboard, we're going to orient some students later today, right? They're they get so much support because they're learning and navigating and seeing it play out for the first time, and they they need a lot of support. So, for example, at YFC, students get an individual supervision hour. They get a team group consult hour. They get a second group consult hour, but just with people at their level, like other students who are experiencing and learning about the same core concepts in the delivery of therapy. And then there's always an open door policy, right? The questions and things come up. Clinical development, it is important.
Yes.
And it does factor in because you don't just, like nobody shows up at work and they're totally competent and expert at their jobs, right? We learn and we mess up and we learn from that. And um, that's just the way it is. And this way, I also think it's not easy to work with kids. That's why it's a specialty because it is so there is these extra layers of work that has to happen. It's not just I'm going to work with you on your treatment plan. It's I have to engage the family.
Yep.
Maybe you have to be in contact with the school, coordinate with the pediatrician. There's a lot of extra work.
Yeah. Or if they're having speech or auditory problems, you're looking at a speech pathologist or an
Mhm.
audiologist. Because a lot of times, kids who are diagnosed as hyperactive ADHD and may be simply something as simple as
Something
a hearing
else.
hearing issue, you know,
Absolutely.
So and all of that's the other thing to teach them is that before they jump to clinical impressions or diagnosis, they rule out any type of physical or social changes that are occurring in that child's life that are contributing to the behavior. With ADHD, a child who's grieving is going to manifest the same symptoms of ADHD. They're going to be hyperactive. They're going to not be able to sit still. They're going to be distracted. Those are products of grief as well as ADHD, and that has to be ruled out, particularly if there's no prior history of ADHD symptoms. That's one of the things when we used to have interns where I worked, I would tell them the first thing you do is don't jump to diagnosis, take a look at other factors physically or socially that are impacting on that child's behavior. If it's a physical issue and that's treated and the behavior disappears, it was physically induced. If it's a change in circumstances like a divorce, marital conflict, a sick sibling, then you can provide the support resources either through, like, let's say, a support group or a play group where they can just interact and play. And because
Mhm.
children learn through the world of play,
Yeah.
you know this. That's how
Yeah.
they develop their concepts of the world is through play.
Yes. Well, and I think that also all of the things you're talking about, right? We're back to the parents. We rely on the parents to tell us the child's history
Yes.
and what's been going on. And so our parents, you listen, in my job, right, where we're increasing access to healthcare, I look at all the barriers that get in the way for people getting the help they need. And one of them is the paperwork. In order to onboard, register as a client, it it's a huge packet that we ask our clients to fill out. It's important, right? There's all kinds of consents. There's a history that's super important. But I mean, as a parent who's filled them out, it's a significant amount of time to invest in completing the information in a way, right, that it can get passed on, being complete. Um, Pulling up, yeah, here's the pediatrician's number. It's not easy for parents to sit down and do all of that, but it is really important so that we understand the context the child exists in, right? And what's going on in the world around them that they have no control over.
And you mentioned a good point about the paperwork. Let's say a lot of it's done online now. So if you have clients from rural areas where the infrastructure isn't all that great as far as broadband width and everything, it's going to be difficult for them to do that. Or if let's say they have never done anything like that before, don't have the capability to really understand that, that's also going to be a struggle.
Right.
Um,
And literacy levels,
yes,
right? Making sure
yes,
that our paperwork is easy to understand.
yeah.
So people don't have to legalese.
That reminds me of a story. If you don't mind, I'm going to
Yeah.
digress for a minute. You could share this with your intern group coming in today.
Okay.
When I was working in an inpatient addictions treatment center in upstate New York, nursing documented that a new admission seemed to be very upset when asked to fill out paperwork. So they asked for counseling to intervene. So they didn't really explore with the guy why he was upset. So I drew the short straw that day, and I went to see him. And I say the short straw kiddingly because he turned out to be a nice guy.
Yeah.
So I sat down with him, and I wasn't accusatory. And that's another thing. You never be accusatory with individuals. Always
Right.
say, look, this is what was told to me. I was asked to come down to see you because you were upset about having to fill out paperwork. Can you tell me what's going on? Not that, well, why are you not filling out
Right.
paperwork? Worst thing you can do is be accusatory, particularly in any situation, but particularly when you're trying to establish a relationship with someone. So he looked at me. He said, Dave, I know I came off a little angry. He goes, before I came into treatment, my wife left me. I got a second DWI. My life was a mess. And besides, I can't read. So I said, oh, that explains that. So I went through the
Mhm.
paperwork with him. We got it filled out. And I told the nurse that this is what happened.
Yeah.
And I tell my students, there's something called assessment by history, which is paperwork that you get either from a legal agency, probation or parole, or you get from another agency who's doing a referral.
Yeah.
Now, providing
Yeah.
you have all the consents in place. Read that assessment by history. It'll save you a lot of time. All she would have had to do, this guy can't read. He's going to need help filling out the paperwork. That changes the dynamic of that conversation. So she sits down with them and says, look, I understand from your paperwork that you have an issue. You have a reading issue. I'm here to help. Let's get this paperwork filled out and go through it step by step. That's all she would have had to do.
I know.
But sometimes we get so disciplined defensive that, well, that's a counseling issue. Well, no, it's a person issue. I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm a janitor. It doesn't matter if I'm a counselor. It doesn't matter if I'm a nurse. It doesn't matter if I'm a nurse practitioner. I can ask that question. I can look at paperwork and say, okay, here's what we're dealing with. Let me be of assistance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in that individual, right, who had those histories, there was paperwork in the system. Here in Illinois, our Medicaid we're required to complete a really thorough assessment on every new client that comes in. I'm not mad at the assessment. I think it's great. I'm mad at what they do with it, and how hard it is to request it from someone who's already done it, right?
Mm.
It's just it's bureaucracy that just takes time.
And a lot of these individuals that request services don't have time. They're typically in crisis mode. And to put them on a wait list for 2 weeks or 3 weeks until you get appropriate paperwork, until there's an opening, that's not a way to do mental health. That's
No,
not a way.
no.
We've talked about this. It's a system that needs to be improved. There's so many different points of entry. They're getting so many different messages from individuals who they're talking to get into the system that it'd be confusing for me. If I was a parent, I would just probably say, screw it. I'm not dealing with this. I got enough to
Right.
deal with.
I've been here YFC for a long time. I love being active in the community, so I participate in countywide initiatives to really strengthen the system we have. But I'm really excited. Last month, we went live with our new website, and that's exciting in and of itself. And on the website, we added a really robust care navigation tool. We're calling it Atlas. And I mean like the road atlases that I grew up
Mhm.
with from Rand McNally, right? The Every state has a different map. So intended to be like that because we spend so much time explaining
Right.
the behavioral healthcare system and where to start, and then how to understand what level of care you need. What are my treatment options? How do I find the right one for me? So all of us collectively here at YFC basically took everything in our brains and created this care navigation tool that sort of walks folks through understanding, recognizing symptoms, understanding acuity and how that matches up
Mhm.
to levels of care. And then for each level of care, what are those treatment options,
Yep.
right? How do I find the right provider for me? So it's all right there on our website right now. So I'm super excited because it is hard for parents to understand. Here I love that interns are onboarding in August. So they're ready for that first wave of school referrals, right?
Yep.
So here, believe it or not, school's going to start August 10th, which is
Wow.
crazy. But, once the kids have been in school for a few weeks and they've done that first round of testing and literacy and all of that, those first progress notes go home. And that's usually when the behavior reports also start to go home. And that's when then we get the calls. And so walking parents through, do you need us? Do you need maybe a referral for a neuropsych test? Right? Do you, like, how bad is it?
Mhm.
Right? It's you're right. There's so many different points of entry. Our children don't come with instruction manuals,
No.
and we got to figure it out. And so now we're back to parents, and how can we help our parents equip them with the tools that they need to navigate the system, to manage themselves so they can hold the framework, right? And then be really that quarterback for their
Yep.
children.
Yep. Yeah, we have to equip them with the skills as much as we have
Yeah.
to equip our children with the skills.
Yes.
Therapy is as much about skill building as it is about doing insight-oriented work or doing,
Yeah.
psychodynamic work. If an individual doesn't know what they need to do to address their issues, you're going to be spinning your wheels. So you give them the basic tools that are identified through assessment, through collaboration, build the foundation, and then from there, the insight becomes more meaningful.
Yes. Well, then along the way, right? We've developed trust with the
Mhm.
client, and the client has tools then to manage when we start to peel back the layers,
Mhm.
But if the client is willing and has the appetite to stay and have the full meal, then really powerful work can happen.
There's something else that just occurred to me, and I want to throw this out too, as far as another reason that may not necessarily be the parents' fault that they're not coming into
Mhm.
treatment. You take a look at generational trauma. Okay, you
Yes.
take a look at there's family histories that have been, that have had histories of addiction, mental health, abuse. One of the intrinsic rules of any of those kind of family systems is don't tell anybody else outside of this
Hmm.
home what's going on. We
Yep.
keep secrets, and they operate under the illusion that only we are capable of solving our own problems. When in reality, they're they're shame based, and so they may not come. So they might say, "Here, fix my kid," when in reality, it isn't that they're uninterested. Is that they're fearful of becoming involved because those secrets that they've previously worked so hard to maintain have the threat now of coming out. And what is it going to look like to the therapist if they see how our family really operates?
And shame's really powerful, right? And it
Mhm.
really holds people. Um, yeah, it could be cultural, right?
Yep.
But there are, lots of reasons that people aren't sure. They might even not know themselves, right? We parent the way we were parented, unless
Mhm.
we very consciously and intentionally do something different.
Yep.
It's just our default as humans, right? That's what we saw, that's what we know. But our world, speaking for myself, I'm 54. So it, the way I was parented, totally not relevant today, right? So parents are they're kind of going blind.
Hmm.
We're just starting to get some concrete, you know, expert advice on how to manage phones and social media and children. It's not easy. And it's hard to swim against the herd or the school. And, it's hard work being a parent. There's a
Yeah.
lot of noise out there. Which voice do I listen to?
Well, being a parent doesn't come with a how-to manual either.
No.
I tell my students that, look, just because you marry the love of your life doesn't mean you're going to be a good parent automatically. It takes a different set of skills.
Yes.
And I really encourage you to take a look at what skills are needed, whether it's through a parenting workshop, whether it's through talking to other parents who have been successful in terms of child raising, understanding what they did that worked, what they did that didn't work. But it isn't easy. It
No.
is not easy at all.
No. And I would also say I don't know that our society and our systems are terribly supportive of parents.
Yeah. Sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parents are really important, right? They are the number one factor in their child's life. And that's a huge responsibility. At the same time, there are supports out there in the community. Like you said, there are
Mhm.
parenting classes, there are support groups, there's psychoeducation, there are great books people can read. Pediatricians are a great source of information
Yep.
if you can get them in your 15-minute appointment slot window.
Or what Medicaid allows or Medicare allows, that kind of stuff.
Right.
We talked prior to recording that you've had an increase in service requests for children between the ages of 6 and 11. And that really just blew my mind because what I was doing at 6 and 11 wasn't anything, didn't resemble anything remotely to therapy. So what is contributing, do you think, to the increase in referrals for children at that age group?
It's a lot of tummy ache, so anxiety,
Yep.
right? And I will also say the number one zip code here in Lake County that we are seeing service requests come from are the communities that have very high Latinx populations. So my fantasy is that those communities are just experiencing so much stress and anxiety, and it's trickling down to the kids, and they don't have the tools. They might even know what it is, right? But their world is changing, and everyone in that family is struggling. It's also behaviors,
Mhm.
right? So separation anxiety, behaviors, and a difficulty, right? It's those adjustment disorders, difficulty
Yep.
adjusting to a move, a divorce,
Yep.
you know, something's happened, there's been a loss, and the family doesn't have the tools, but it's showing up in the kid's behavior.
You get a lot of magical thinking, especially around the age of 6 or 8, that the child thinks that something they did caused the divorce, caused the death, and it didn't. And that's one of the things that we need to normalize. No, it wasn't anything you said or did that
Right.
caused this. It was something different. And to
Yes.
explain it in an age appropriate way. But yeah, you mentioned the other thing. I mean, it's a crazy world out there right now with
Hmm.
individuals living under, immigrants living under the threat of deportation. I can imagine that that's got to be extremely stressful for those, the Latinx communities or other communities that are facing that. And the other thing, kids are going to mirror that. The kids are going to mirror that type of anxiety.
Yep.
I think there was a study that was done that after 9/11, that children vicariously experience trauma just even in the background, just seeing over and over the Twin Towers coming down. And depending on the age of the child will see that as a repeated event. They won't see it as one event that's being played over and over again. So if
Yeah.
you're showing that 30 times in an hour, they think it's 30 times that the towers come crashing down. And
Yeah.
that contributes to a lot of generalized anxiety and trauma vicariously.
Yeah.
So that also has to be something that you and your staff take into account and take a look at the whole just general environment in terms of how that's playing into behavior as well too.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
We had a tween a couple of years ago who anxiety, but was and couldn't leave the house. And it came up that mom was super anxious about someone in the family being scooped up by ice. And so, you know, that. How do we work with that, right? Do telehealth, engage, meet them where they are. And we can't change their circumstances,
No.
but all we can do is give them coping skills.
Yeah. Maybe a lot of mindfulness stuff. Just try to get them to take it day by day. Maybe a safety plan or an evacuation plan, something like to that effect, where
Right.
they can at least feel safe and they have some structure in the process, and they can also collaborate with that structure. But you have to orient a bunch of interns here real quick. So as much as I'd love to talk to you for another hour, but we'll look to wrap up for now. But I've got a question for you.
Yes.
It's totally unrelated to anything we've talked about. So it's a
Dave
surprise.
curveball.
The Dave
Love it.
curve. Yeah, it's a curve, but it's a nice curveball.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you, if you could orchestrate the perfect day for yourself, not for anybody else, what would that perfect day look like?
I'm going to go with what came into my mind first, because we've been talking about work and I'm sitting here at work. Working with my team. Like, I really enjoy working with my team and envisioning possibilities and coaching them, right? On what are we going to do? How are you going to manage that? But then my brain went to, I'd really like to be at the beach. The beach is my happy place. Sand in between my toes, waves. Yeah, with a really yummy dinner. I like food.
What's your favorite food?
Oh, well, I love pizza and I think carbs. Most carbs I like. I made my first focaccia loaf the other day.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, the other thing, you're in the Chicago, Illinois area, so that's a home of deep dish, Garrett's popcorn, the ultimate hot dog. So you've got plenty of carb choices to choose from.
I do have lots of carb choices. Yes.
So, and if you were here in my neck of the woods in upstate New York, you'd have a variety of different carb choices. I could take you to all the places that would feed your carb cravings. So,
awesome. I might have to road trip.
Yeah, you might have to. Let me know when you do.
Okay.
Before we go, any final takeaways, anything you want our audience to remember today? If just one thing that you want them to remember, what would that be from our conversation?
Be kind to yourself. It's hard and it's scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always something you can do.
Absolutely. Sometimes I think we operate under the illusion that we have less power than we think we do. The power is within us, and we can be empowered to use it in a way that's going to benefit us, in a way that's going to benefit others whose path we cross. So, my last question: people want to get in touch with you, find out more about YFC, access your new website. What's the best way for them to do that?
A website address is www.counselingforall. And best way to sort of hear from me and stay connected to me is through LinkedIn. I'm pretty regular on LinkedIn and love the discussions we have there.
And I will make sure all of your contact information, also including the links to our first episode, get into the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Before we go live. You're welcome. Janelle, thank you so much for another wonderful conversation. Somehow we got to figure out a part 3.
Okay. I like that. We can do it.
Yeah, I think we can come up with something. So
totally.
But thank you so much again for just a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And with that is a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.